What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of IVLeagueMindset. Today we're sitting down with Mitch Taylor. He's an entrepreneur, a surfer, and he's a big member of the community here in London, Ontario. So Mitch, why don't you give our listeners a little summary of who you are and what you're about?
Sure. Mitch Taylor. I own a creative services agency in London called Claim Your Leisure Media. Primarily, for the past 5 years, I've been operating a clothing brand called Life of Leisure Surf and Social Club. I like to create stuff. I like to tell stories. I like to surf. And I'm passionate about good balance in life. Lifestyle and entrepreneurship. I've recently labeled myself as a lifestyle entrepreneur on LinkedIn, which in my mind is kind of like I put a lot of effort and a lot of thought and a lot of time into what elements I want to be in my lifestyle and work back from there. And business entrepreneurship is a tool to accomplish those things, basically.
One thing that I really respect about you and that I love about you, and we've known each other for a little while now, is like when we first started hanging out and talking, we both connected over the book The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And I read it and I thought of all his ideas and I was like, man, that'd be so nice to do this, because I was already sort of set in a career and doing my thing. But you read that book and you thought to yourself, I want to build a job and a career around the things that I love to do in life, so that every day doesn't feel like work at all, which is what you've done with all your leisure stuff. Talk to me about the mindset of what it was like once you read that book to then put that plan into action.
Well, I think that that book is all about tactics to put plans into action. You know what I mean? So my life kind of became about tactics. Like, what tactics do I use? What work? What doesn't work? And that's very indicative of the entrepreneurial experience. Is you try something, you iterate. If it works, you go with it. If it doesn't, you switch directions, right? And at that time, I wish I'm terrible with years, but maybe 7 years ago now, maybe more, which is crazy to think about. But I was in Costa Rica on a surf trip, and I had a job in construction where it was seasonal. Would work for the summer months, the months where the ground wasn't frozen, basically. And then when digging stopped, we stopped. I did utility locates. Amazing job. So much freedom and stuff like that. My parents and people around me were shocked. Like, you have a job with this much freedom and you still want to be more autonomous.
Yeah.
You still want more autonomy. They're like, you're crazy. But that job allowed me to travel in the winter months. So we went down to Costa Rica and rented a spot for 3-4 months. And it was right around the time that Instagram had become a thing. And I was really intrigued by, first of all, just its influence on people, social media's influence on people. From my own personal life, I started to realize, man, I'm spending an insane amount of time on this. What does this even mean? And then knew in the back of my head that I wanted to sort of shift to something more autonomous, something more, something that I drive the ship sort of thing, and designed a website and started social media feeds and read the 4-Hour Workweek in sort of that same shot. And it focused me on tactics, and that's that whole book is really about taking stock, thinking about your time very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And that's huge. I think that's what, to me, being a lifestyle entrepreneur boils down to. And I think he uses the term lifestyle design in that book, which is sweet. Wish I invented that. But it's thinking just critically about, or objectively about the hours in a day, the hours it takes to accomplish certain things, and working back from there. So I knew I wanted to learn about running a business. The Life of Leisure brand actually started as an excuse to go out and ask people in Costa Rica, property owners, boutique hotel owners, restaurant owners, how they got started, how they were able to, because there's people from all over the world there, how they were able to come from where they're from and start a business there. And I started investing in real estate like pretty young in my 20s. Just, I've always sort of had this mindset of, what are the things that I inevitably have to do in life, and like how can I make them work for me to free up time?
Yeah.
So I was interested. I wanted to buy property and like build a spot and just be able to go surf all the time, basically, which is still a goal. The 4-hour work week started that iterative process of like, understanding my time, understanding my income, understanding and clarifying my goals, and turning them into actionable items and moving towards them,
Yeah. And in those early days, I'm sure there was a lot of like frustration, a lot of trial error, a lot of failure. Did you ever think about like going back to that gig that you had as a locator and being like, man, this is too hard for me? Or was that goal of like lifestyle design, doing what you want to do, the like go-getter to make you keep moving forward?
No, it was like I worked that job while I was doing it. I ran out of money a few times and went and did other jobs. I worked in general contracting with my good buddy for a lot of time. I'd say for the first 5 years, if not more, there would be times when I'd take on certain projects or things like that to make money in a different way, to sort of fuel the learning process, I guess. I'll probably reference Tim Ferriss 1,000 times. Anything I say, because the guy is like, all of his content has been massively influential on me. But he talks about somewhere about how, rather than spending $100K and going back to business school, he decided to invest it and learn, baptism by fire style. And that was kind of the position I was in back after that trip to Costa Rica, is, do I go back to business school? Do I spend the money on that? Or do I just start and try and learn as I go? And I chose the second option, and that's kind of been it. But yeah, like copious amounts of financial stress. Like I've totally run out of money. Have had to borrow money. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that doesn't really stop ever, because as the projects and things get more ambitious, part of what you're practicing is your risk tolerance, and like, your tolerance to just be outside of your comfort zone with stuff like that. So the failure and recovering from failure is huge. Is like is the most important thing. Like our shop, for example, that, prior to having that shop for 2.5 years, everything we did in there, from like throwing the parties, working with musicians, the retail, all of it, there was successes and failures along the way. But then when it came to like purchasing the property and like carrying on, I put so much time and effort into a business model that would work in there, a plan, like logistics of how the whole plan would get executed. Like, I can show you the like documents of like things that weren't there before that are here now. Yeah. And then that deal falls through and it's just like garbage.
All that work. Yeah.
But you spend so much mental energy and time and you try and keep emotion out of it, but emotion gets in there regardless, right? So you put a lot of energy into it, and then it's just like gone. And you're like, wow, man, come on. It's like you've created this like friend and thing that's gonna exist like along with you, and it disappears. So I think you gotta be willing to deal with that kind of stuff.
And how do you deal with that? because like for anyone, you put that much time and effort into something, it's so heartbreaking. I know a lot of people might take that and just like discouragement eats them up.
I think like there's a hump you get over in the beginning. Like if you take that step and get over that initial hump and realize as you're getting over that initial hump that the humps are going to get bigger and bigger, and that's the process. Like for me, I just, I get that that's a thing, and I don't know, you put in the work to understand the process, I guess, to really understand the process. And then don't beat yourself up and keep chugging forward, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like anything, right? It's like if you're a little overweight and you want to lose some weight and you're like, all right, I'm going to hit the gym really hard this week and the scale doesn't move. And then it's like, I'm going to hit it again hard this week and the scale doesn't move. But it's that like long-term process that you have to think about and know that like, okay, short term, it's going to be a little rough, but you just keep staying consistent. You keep putting in the work, and the long-term goal is well worth it.
Yeah, and I think, that tying back to what we started talking about and the influence of 4-hour work week, like, goals. If you have goals and you they're clear, there's more than one way to skin a cat, you know what I mean? Like, you can get to what you're trying to get to in copious different ways. So if one door closes, then you're looking for the next one or building the next one, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. So that's how I look at it,
mm-hmm.
and I think it gets easier, to be honest. Like you get, the more you practice something, the more you get better at it, quite frankly. So, but again, the focus is time, right? The focus is time and you want good return on investment of your time, so that the rest of that time is freed up to do what you want to be doing.
For sure.
Surfing, traveling, writing, painting, playing the trumpet.
For sure. I mean, time's like the one thing we don't get back, right? Like 100%. You can lose a bunch of money and you can work hard and get your money back, but like we don't get yesterday back. Time is the limiting asset that we have in our life that you have to take full advantage of.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100% believe that.
So you talked about goals there for a sec. Do you have any specific formulas or like ways that, like when this idea comes to your head that you want it to be a goal, how you map it out so that you can achieve it?
I just write everything down. I keep like to-do lists. And there's a TED Talk I watched. I couldn't reference who it was or who said it, but I keep to-do lists, and I understand that writing things down gives you like sort of the same biochemical boost as doing the thing.
Yeah. So
I acknowledge that in the process of the to-do list, but I just keep track. You know what I mean? And try and hold myself as accountable as possible. I think right now I'm in an interesting phase because I don't have very well-defined long-term goals. Because like we were talking about, parenthood is just so full on, like, you got to be present for those moments that I haven't thought a lot about 5 years down the road. I've just been doing everything I can to kind of make sure everything right now is good and solid and you know what I mean? But I think for me, what works is just writing it down and referencing it and writing it down and referencing it and working on the idea and clarifying the vision and eliminating things that are noise or distraction or not important.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Tim Ferriss is a guy who talks a lot about the 80-20 principle, Pareto's law. How 20% of the things you do provide 80% of the return, and it works in multiple ways.
Yeah.
So I try and just be super. I'm always calling. You know what I mean? I'm always calling and always thinking about what is this important? Why is it important? And writing it down and re-referencing. And
Yeah.
I'm daily, start my day in my journal and finish my day in my journal for the most part.
Yeah.
So
I know, like, even for me, my journal that I write in usually every morning and every single night for sure. The fact that when you can put an idea in your head down on paper and physically see it, it's very, very transformative. Because I know there's a lot of times where I come up with these ideas and I don't write them down, and then you go back the next day or the day after and it's not there anymore, you can't find it. Or you just think of it in your head and maybe you continue to think about it every single day in your head.
Yeah.
And it's always just that thought where, like, when you write it down on paper or put it in a to-do list or something like that, that's where it becomes real and it's like, all right, like, I can achieve that. I'm going to go after that.
Yeah. And it's funny too how I think, those things just have a way of finding you too. Like, I wrote down and I found it in an old journal, like probably something, because I, have probably been doing this since my early 20s and I'm 31 now. So, in an old journal saying, Tim Ferriss thing, like list all the material things you want so you can start to figure out how much that's going to cost you and how much money you got to generate. And one was a house by the beach in Ontario, by London, by my family and stuff like that. And it wasn't something I actively pursued, which is crazy. It just, circumstances just conspired. It's like, oh, here's this house, 100 steps from the beach, and it's actually cheaper than the houses in your market. And I was like, this is wild to me, that, you know what I mean? So I think that's never time wasted, is writing down things you're thinking about or things you want and things you want to do.
Yeah.
That's super important, I think, is just give it life on paper, and that'll, kind of stoke the fire to bring it to life.
For sure.
In reality.
Yeah. And for our listeners and viewers, we're sitting in that house by the beach today doing this interview.
Yeah. These pictures by my boy Andrew Whiten, Veghead Drew. I got his stuff all over the house, but I'm very like, water for me is like the thing, you know what I mean? Like, when I started meditating, I don't know if you call it, like, and this is more like mindfulness meditation, but like the inflow and outflow of the breath, I'm always picturing waves washing in and washing out.
Yeah.
And now at night we can crank the windows open most nights and hear it, and like in the fall when the wind picks up and the waves pick up, you can like feel them pounding the shore in the house and stuff, and something about that just like gasses me up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like I mentioned in your intro, you're a surfer.
Yeah.
So that's why water, the lake, is near and dear to your heart. A lot of people wouldn't think that you can surf in Ontario.
Yeah.
But if anyone has followed Life of Leisure, or you've seen any of these crazy guys, fall and winter is sort of like your surf season here in Ontario. Talk about that a little bit.
So fall and winter bring the cold weather, and basically the way waves are created is typically an energy transfer from wind to water.
Yeah.
There's like the science around a wave is like mind blowing. It's like so trippy to think about, but when you think of a wave moving through water, the water isn't moving, it's energy moving through the medium of water. So it's like a sound wave. So if you have like a big storm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a couple days later, swell's going to show up in Hawaii, kind of thing. And that to me, like, understanding that has made me enjoy surfing so much more, because you're a part of this like thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're participating in something that took place hundreds of miles away sometimes.
Yeah.
And it I think where people are kind of missing the mark in like modern life is a connection with nature and the natural environment around them. And surfing has really brought a lot to my life that way, because you just come out of the water feeling energized from it. And so yeah, anyway, fall, winter around here is the season because the lakes kind of like act as a micro environment of what I just described, like, you know, storm in the middle of the ocean and waves don't know why. It's like when the waves are up on the lake, the storm is on, like it's happening because it's a smaller environment and there's just not, you know, there's not enough medium for the energy to travel through for like proper groundswell. So like if on an ocean your swell duration is 12 seconds, that means you have 12 seconds between one wave and the next. It's usually half that on the lakes, so that's why it's kind of like at certain spots at certain times it can be kind of crazy. It's almost like being in a washing machine, you know what I mean? But it's you know, when the wind comes in cold and the water's warm, there's just like that's the best environment for energy transfer, and that's when the waves tend to be the best. And that happens right up until the lakes freeze in mid-February, if they freeze. Yeah. For the most part, they do.
And then, like, I think some of you guys are crazy because it'll be like middle of December. You guys are out there surfing, you come out, like, beards frozen, ice raining.
Yeah.
What's your mind like trying to prepare yourself knowing that you're going to freeze your ass off?
I might not be the best lake surfer to talk to about like the ice cold sessions. Like I've done them. But there's guys who like live and breathe that. So I'm gonna start off by saying I'm not an authority on that subject. Like I'd rather spend the money on a plane ticket to get somewhere where I can surf in boardies than like tough out the winter here. Yeah. It's like anything that's an exercise in coming into a super stressful situation and trying to calm your mind. Like I'll do a cold shower every morning. It's the same physiological response to that. It's just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like exponentiated by the fact that there's like sometimes driving snow and big waves. It just makes it that much more extreme. Yeah. But essentially, like when you go in and get that blast of cold water, it's the same physiological response as having a cold shower. Yeah. Probably not as cold as you could get it in the shower, but like an ice bath. So yeah, just kind of preparing yourself for that. So it's like mental, vision, breath kind of thing. And hoping your wetsuit doesn't rip open and turn into an ice cube, you know what I mean? But the wetsuits, the rubber is extremely, it keeps you warm, and you just got to be able to recognize when there's been times where, the hands get frozen and the limbs start to go because the waves are good and you want to stay out, right? Yeah. But physically it takes its toll on you. Yeah. So just trying to stay in your body and and have a good time. But surfing in general is an exercise in that because, if you're not attuned to where you are and all that kind of stuff, you're not going to catch any good waves anyway. So, preparing for, like, I hate it. The worst part is after getting the wetsuit off, that's when you freeze. Yeah. That's when you freeze for sure. But yeah, it's fun. It's not for everybody, but we have fun doing it. And I think, like I said, you practice it, right? So the more you go out and you get into these kind of situations, the less wild it seems. But I've frozen up at like spots and breaks, being like, I can't go in, I'm too scared. It's too cold. Mm-hmm. Like this is fucked. Yeah. Yeah. It happens, right? Yeah, I guess like the reward is worth all that pain and punishment that you put yourself through. Like the reward of doing what you love to do, surfing, being around the water, you deal with it. Just like the frustrations of starting a business, the reward of having that free time in your life to be doing what you're doing, it's all worth it at the end of the day. Yeah. I think we talked a lot about process. I think anytime you push yourself into uncharted territory to do something that, is really uncomfortable, you come away from that, like, having grown as a person, and I like that process. Yeah, that's kind of why I do everything I do. Yeah. Like first time I went surfing on the lakes, we went to Bayfield. on the wrong wind. I had a wetsuit that was too small and a board that was too small, and we jumped in, and I'm following a buddy of mine who's like used to babysit me as a kid, and he's like gnarliest dude ever. Like this guy's like, you know, he lives out in Squamish now, and just, you know, has been his whole life like an extreme sports madman, and just an all around crazy dude.
Yeah.
Great guy, but crazy guy. He jumps in and I jump in, and the waves are going the wrong way. In Bayfield, you want a northwest wind, so the waves wrap around the pier, and so this was southwest wind, so the waves were literally slamming into the pier and reverberating off and just like creating this massive washing machine. And I'm like, this is fucked. We can't surf this. You know what I mean? And so I didn't know anything about how the lake surfing worked and wind directions, weather, anything at that point. I was just following this guy's lead. And we get out and we're like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Let's go to Lake Erie. Let's come here.
Yeah.
And I was so freaked out from having jumped in this water and literally thought I was going to drown that when I got here, I froze. I couldn't go in the water. I just sat on the pier and watched the whole time. The guys were catching waves and it looked fun.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm just too freaked out. And now I'm living here, you know what I mean? And like, so that process of still show up to spots and it's big or it's cold and it's gnarly and whatever, that constantly, you know, tests your mettle, I guess. And it, you know, it's the same thing with business. It's just I guess maybe it's not more calculated with business. You got to be smart in those situations. If you throw yourself into a bad, you know, situation in the water, you could probably fucking die.
Yeah.
With business, you probably won't die, but you could lose some money or invest too much time into a thing or a person or a deal,
for sure,
and you won't get it back.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe to wrap this up, do you have any tips or strategies that you can give our listeners if they have these big goals out there they want to accomplish? Or
I think just start trying whatever it is you want to do, or at least start to think about what it is you want to do. A lot of people, I think, complain about their circumstances or where they want to be without consciously thinking about what they would do or how they would do it. It's got to start with some semblance of goals and a plan and a work back, you know?
Yeah.
But once you have that, like just try it. Don't be afraid to fail. Try not to worry too much about what other people think, but take that with a grain of salt because, you know, your family's your family, your relationships are your relationships. It's kind of silly to double middle finger everybody and just be like, this is what I do now.
Yeah,
but, like, you know, if you can logically and rationally explain to them what your goals are based on and what your plan is, hopefully they support you, you know, and if they don't, hopefully they still hang around.
Yeah.
But don't worry too much about that. Like, you know, you got to focus on you and being happy and doing your thing. So yeah, try it and don't worry too much about it.
I like it. And if they want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
I am on Instagram as @LeisureMitch. Life_of_leisure is the clothing brand, and I should know what our handle is for the media company. It's called Claim Your Leisure Media Inc.
We'll link it all below
so
everyone can get to it.
Mitch Taylor.
Yeah.
Look me up. Yeah. Send me an email. Give me a call. Ask Dan for my number.
Yeah. Beauty, buddy.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Cool. I got a question for you before we finish.
Okay.
What got you interested in doing a podcast?
So the main reason I wanted to start a podcast, I've been listening to podcasts for like 7 or 8 years now. It started when I was working in Mississauga, and I drove every single day for a year commuting, and music wasn't cutting it for me. I had to like start listening to people talking. Like I used to listen to AM radio all the time, and I just enjoyed the talking. And I clicked that little purple icon on the iPhone that I'd never seen before. And back then, there's maybe like 100 podcasts. Like all the guys that are at the top of the game now were like the guys that I was listening to back then.
Yeah.
And the Joe Rogan Experience is one of the podcasts that I love the most. I've learned so much from listening to him have conversations with people, and that's why I wanted to start a podcast, because I wanted to have these cool conversations with people. I was trying to do it by myself and it wasn't working out, and then finally I approached Hawk, and Hawk and I are on the same like wavelength when it comes to mental stuff, training stuff. We'd be doing these workouts and we'd be just having these conversations, and I was like, man, like these are beauty conversations. People need to hear what we're talking about. So I approached him with the idea of starting a podcast. He was down to do it, and our goal is just to have conversations with people and try to help as many people as possible from learning things from us talking to people, which is what I've done through listening to podcasts. And I think it's just a powerful medium for people to learn.
I would say, like, going back to your last question, most important thing or like piece of advice is make time in your life to consume content around that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because like mindset, you know, if it's business or entrepreneurship you want to get into, you know, if you want to train, like make time to learn about the stuff you think you need in your life. It's huge. Like I'm the same way. Love consuming content, love reading. I think it's massively important for people to you know, achieve and maintain a certain quality of life. So.
For sure, and it's so easy nowadays. Like if there's a skill that you want to learn or there's something you want to get better at, there's YouTube, there's podcasts, there's Google, there's like endless amounts of possibilities where like only 10 years ago you had to go to a library and look at a book and try to read it. Like I love reading, but I'm not a big like open a book and read. Yeah. But audiobooks are like my jam, because I'll throw it on when I'm cutting the grass or I'm driving or I'm doing something. There's so many different mediums nowadays for you to be able to consume the content that you want to get in the way that works best for you. It's easier than ever. There's no excuse to really not do what you want to do now with what we have out there.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like shifted to where there's like an overabundance of content where it can become a impediment to taking action.
Yeah.
The same way I kind of said, like you do the to-do list, and that gives you like that good feeling that you're accomplishing something without actually doing it.
Yeah.
So does a podcast, listening to it and like thinking in your head, fuck yeah, like I'll bang out 100 reps or whatever, right? It's like, you know, you've worked out without working out kind of thing. I think that's like the challenge now is calling and finding that balance between like learning and action on a day-to-day basis, like a time management like function of your life. Book time in for learning, book time in for executing.
For sure.
And stick to it.
For sure.
But you can't have one without the other.
No, you need to be doing, because you need to be failing to be able to learn what you're doing wrong to keep moving that propeller forward.
Yeah. I respect this though, man. I appreciate you having me on here, because I've thought long and hard about a podcast and a concept, and I love this sort of, you know, atmosphere of, you know, talking about what makes people tick and what makes them tick more efficiently, and you know, so I appreciate the fact that you've had me on here.
Thanks, we appreciate it. Until next time, cheers guys.